The iron gate slammed shut with a cold final clang, right in his face. For a moment, everything went still. The wind hushed, the birds seemed to disappear, and the world narrowed down to a single, unbelievable truth. The man standing outside, dressed simply in a gray shirt and dark trousers, was being denied entry into the very mansion he had built from nothing. His name was Marcus Hale, and this was his home. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and standing up for what's right, take a moment right now to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this deserve to be heard. Marcus stood tall, but his eyes betrayed something deeper than anger. It wasn't just humiliation. It was a quiet, piercing disbelief. Years of sacrifice, sleepless nights, and silent battles echoed in his mind as he stared at the guards who now blocked his path like he was a stranger, or worse, a threat. The security team, 5 men in crisp uniforms, looked at him with suspicion, their hands hovering near their radios. They spoke over each other, their voices sharp, their expressions firm, refusing to budge. To them, he didn't look like a CEO. He didn't look like the owner of a multi-million-dollar estate. He looked like someone who didn't belong, and that was the problem. Marcus inhaled slowly, his chest rising and falling as he fought to control the storm inside him. This wasn't the first time life had tested him like this, but it was the first time it had happened at his own front gate. He remembered another gate, rusted, crooked, and barely standing, the entrance to the rundown apartment complex where he had grown up. Back then, no one had to block him. Life itself had already done that. Poverty had wrapped around his family like chains, tightening with every passing year. His mother worked 2 jobs, her hands always rough, her smile always tired. His father had left before Marcus could even remember his face. Every day was a struggle, every dollar stretched thin. Yet somehow, through all the hardship, his mother had planted something powerful in him, a belief that he was meant for more. Not better than others, just more than his circumstances. Marcus carried that belief through school, through the whispers of classmates who mocked his worn-out clothes, through the teachers who underestimated him, through the nights he studied under flickering lights while hunger gnawed at his stomach. He carried it when he got his first rejection letter, then his 10th, then his 50th. He carried it when doors slammed in his face. And now, years later, here he was again, standing in front of another door that refused to open. Only this time, it was his. The lead guard stepped forward, his posture rigid, his voice firm. He didn't recognize Marcus, and he made no effort to hide his doubt. Rules were rules, he said. No ID, no entry, no exceptions. Marcus could have shouted. He could have demanded respect, pulled out his phone, made a call, and ended this entire situation in seconds. But he didn't. Instead, he looked at each of the guards, really looked at them. He saw not just their uniforms, but their expressions, the subtle discomfort, the defensiveness, the underlying assumptions they might not even realize they were making. And that hurt more than the gate, because Marcus hadn't built this mansion just to live in luxury. He had built it as a symbol, a reminder of how far he had come, a place where his mother could finally rest, where no one would ever look down on them again. Yet here he was, being judged at his own doorstep. Minutes passed, heavy and suffocating. The tension grew thicker with every second. One of the guards spoke into his radio, calling for confirmation, his eyes never leaving Marcus. Another shook his head slightly, as if already convinced that this situation would end badly. Marcus finally spoke, his voice calm but firm, carrying a quiet authority that made the guards pause. He told them his name. He told them to check their records. He told them without anger, without arrogance, that they were making a mistake. But the doubt lingered. It wasn't until a sleek black car pulled up behind him that everything changed. The driver stepped out quickly, his face pale with concern. He rushed toward Marcus, addressing him with immediate recognition and respect. In that instant, the atmosphere shifted. The guards exchanged glances, uncertainty creeping into their expressions. The truth was undeniable now. The man they had blocked, the man they had treated like an outsider, was the owner of the estate. Silence fell again, heavier than before. Marcus didn't smile. He didn't show triumph or satisfaction. Instead, there was something else in his eyes, something deeper, something that spoke of disappointment more than anger. He slowly turned toward the gates as they opened, this time without resistance. the iron bars moving as if ashamed of what had just happened. But Marcus didn't walk in. Instead, he stood still, because this wasn't just about a mistake. It was about something bigger. He turned back to the security team, his gaze steady, his presence commanding without needing to raise his voice. In that moment, the power he carried wasn't just financial. It was moral. It was earned through years of struggle, through every door that had once been closed to him. And now he had a decision to make. He could let it go, or he could make sure something like this never happened again. To anyone. The guards shifted uncomfortably, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. They knew what was coming, even if Marcus hadn't spoken yet. And when he finally did, his words were quiet, but they hit harder than any shout ever could. Within minutes, the entire security team was dismissed. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of principle. Marcus believed in accountability. He believed that people should be judged by their actions, not their appearance. And what had happened at that gate was a failure, not just of procedure, but of understanding. Understanding. Yet even as the guards left, heads lowered, something unexpected happened. Marcus didn't feel relief, he felt heavy, because he knew that firing them wouldn't erase what had just happened. It wouldn't change the deeper issue that still existed in the world outside those gates. That realization stayed with him as he finally stepped inside his mansion. The grand halls, the polished floors, the luxurious decor, it all felt different now. Less like a victory, and more like a reminder of how far society still had to go. That night, Marcus sat alone in the living room, the silence wrapping around him like a second skin. He thought about his mother, about everything she had endured, about the lessons she had taught him, and he made a decision. The next morning, instead of moving on, Marcus took action. He restructured the entire hiring system for his estate and his company. He introduced new training programs focused on empathy, awareness, and unbiased judgment. He partnered with organizations that worked to create opportunities for those often overlooked. He didn't just want success. He wanted change. Slowly, things began to shift, not just within his company, but beyond it. People started to notice. Conversations started to happen. And what had begun as a painful moment at a gate turned into something much bigger, a movement toward understanding. Marcus never forgot that day. Not because of the humiliation, but because of what it taught him. That true success isn't just about reaching the top. It's about making sure others aren't pushed down along the way. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like, comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Your support helps stories like this reach more people. And before we end, I have a special request for you. Comment below with the words "A kindness wins" if you believe the world needs more compassion and understanding today. Because in the end, it wasn't the mansion that defined Marcus Hale. It was the way he chose to open doors, even after one had been slammed in his face. Marcus didn't sleep much that night. The silence inside the mansion felt louder than the confrontation at the gates. Every polished surface, every perfectly placed piece of furniture reflected a version of success that suddenly felt incomplete. He walked slowly through the halls, his footsteps echoing not with pride, but with questions. He had fired the entire security team. It had been the right decision, but it hadn't been an easy one, because Marcus knew something most people didn't like to admit. People don't just wake up biased or judgmental. They learn it. From systems, from experiences, from fear, from the quiet, unspoken rules society plants deep in the mind. And that meant the problem wasn't just those 5 men. It was bigger. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the tall glass windows, but Marcus didn't admire it. Instead, he stood near the same gate where everything had happened just hours ago. The iron bars gleamed in the morning light, looking almost innocent, as if they hadn't just been a barrier between a man and his own home. He ran his hand along the cold metal and closed his eyes for a moment. Then he made a decision that would change everything. Within days, Marcus called for a full company-wide meeting. Not the usual executive boardroom gathering, but something much larger. Employees from every level were invited. Assistants, janitors, interns, managers, directors. No hierarchy, no separation. When people entered the massive conference hall, they were surprised to see Marcus standing at the front, not in a tailored suit, but in simple clothes. The same kind he had worn the day he was denied entry. He didn't start with numbers. He didn't start with numbers. He didn't talk about profits. He told them a story. Not just about what happened at the gate, but about where he came from, about the nights he went to bed hungry, about the times he was judged before he even spoke, about the doors that never opened for him, simply because of how he looked. The room grew quiet. People leaned in. Some felt uncomfortable. Others felt something deeper: recognition. Marcus didn't accuse anyone. He didn't shame anyone. But he held up a mirror, not just to the company, but to society itself. He spoke about how easy it is to make assumptions, how quickly people decide who belongs and who doesn't, how often opportunities are given based on comfort rather than fairness. And then he did something unexpected. He announced a new initiative. So every employee, regardless of position, would go through immersive training. Not just technical training, but human training. Real conversations, real stories, real exposure to perspectives they might never have considered. It wasn't mandatory because of punishment. It was necessary because of growth. Some people resisted at first. Change always makes people uncomfortable. But Marcus didn't back down. He knew that real transformation doesn't happen through comfort. It happens through reflection. Weeks turned into months, and slowly something began to shift. People started listening more. They questioned their assumptions. They became aware of the silent judgments they had never even realized they carried. Marcus didn't just stop at his company. He extended the initiative to other organizations, partnered with community leaders, funded programs that focused on equal opportunity and education. The story of what happened at his gate spread, but not as a scandal, as a lesson. Meanwhile, something else was happening quietly behind the scenes. Marcus had kept records of the security team he had fired. He knew their names, their backgrounds, their families. And despite what they had done, he couldn't ignore something inside him. Because once he had been the one standing on the outside too. So one afternoon, without any media, without any announcement, Marcus invited them back, not to rehire them, but to talk. When they arrived, their expressions were guarded, unsure. They expected anger, maybe even humiliation, but what they got instead was something they didn't see coming. Marcus listened. One by one, they spoke about their fears, about the pressure of their job, about past experiences that had shaped their instincts, sometimes wrongly. None of it excused what had happened, but it explained it, and that mattered. Marcus made it clear what they did was unacceptable. It had consequences. Fun. But he also made something else clear. People can learn if they're willing to face themselves honestly. He offered them a chance not to return to their old roles, but to go through the same training programs he had built. To rebuild not just their careers, but their understanding. Some of them accepted, some didn't, and that was okay, because real change can't be forced, it has to be chosen. Months later, Marcus stood once again at the gates of his mansion. But this time, everything felt different. A new security team stood there, diverse, trained, aware. More importantly, human. They didn't just follow rules, they understood them. One of them greeted Marcus with a respectful nod, not out of obligation, but recognition. Not just of who he was, but what he stood for. Marcus walked through the gates, not with the weight he had carried before, but with a quiet sense of purpose. The mansion no longer felt like just a symbol of success. It felt like a starting point. Because Marcus had realized something powerful. The real victory wasn't building a life where no one could block him. It was building a world where fewer people would be blocked in the first place. And as he stepped inside, he paused for a moment, looking back at the gates one last time. Boom. They were still strong, still tall, but they no longer felt like barriers. They felt like reminders of how far he had come and how far there still was to go. If this part of the story moved you even a little, don't just watch and scroll away. Take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in change, and subscribe for more stories that matter. And before you leave, here's something special. Comment below with the words that choose understanding if you believe that real strength comes from empathy, not judgment. Because stories like Marcus's aren't just meant to be watched, they're meant to be lived.